JKA Massey Instructors course. So today we're going to continue with our philosophy section, and this time we're going to put up the concept of shu-ha-ri. So just put that up there first, and this kanji here is shu, and we can put that one up as a separate item here. And the next one is ha. And the last one, li. Now I'll go into the second two in a moment, but first I'd like to just describe each part of shu-ha-ri, so to explain how this kanji set goes together. So first of all we have shu. Now, shu in itself, you may already recognize this kanji because we've discussed it before. It comes from mamoru, which is in the dojo-kun. So this one basically translates as mamoru. And mamoru, as you know, means to protect or defend or guard. In the case of the dojo-kun, you can follow the path of truth, this sort of thing. Now, what we're looking at for shu is the idea of training, basic training. So we could say that this would fit with the idea of kihon. So the first things we have to have in karate training is our basics. And the idea of the shu is to promise to follow these basics. Now, where do these basics come from? We can look at the concept of koryu. And koryu, I'll just put that over there as well. So koryu is the, let's call it the old school training. Actually, this kanji here means old, and this kanji here can mean flow, koryu. So what we have there is the flow of the old training, and the concept of the old training was basics, and more basics. So it just carried on with basics. There was actually you've probably heard this one before, and this one here is basically hitokata, means one kata, sannen. So one kata, 3 years. So in the old school of training, one kata was practiced for 3 years, basics, until that was perfected on its basic concept, and then you were allowed to go on to more advanced kata or another kata. So the idea of shu, which is what we've put here, is to promise to yourself, or firstly of course to your instructor, but also to yourself, to get your basics in, to follow old school thinking, train, and keep those basics as the root, the fundamental of your karate practice. So this is that idea. So that one is shu here. So I'm just going to leave that one up on the top of the board for a moment. And then we'll go on to the next one, which is the ha. Now, for the ha, if you like, the next part of it was to develop a better idea of how to keep the training going, like to keep people participating. So, Funakoshi, in the early days there, obviously being Okinawan, was training old style karate. Then he came over to Japan, and during that time he realised that perhaps not everybody was quite so dedicated as to do hitokata sannen. They maybe dropped off a little bit. Their enthusiasm died a little bit. So there was an idea from around about that time called Kaizen. And just put that one up on the board too so you can see that. This is Kaizen, so Kai is here. Then there's actually a different kanji to the Zen that we were looking at the other day with regard to Buddhism. This is a different one. So Kai, in this sense, basically means change. And Zen can translate as good. So the idea was that Funakoshi wanted to keep people interested in participating. That was the general idea of disseminating karate into Japan mainland. And so he spoke with Jigoro Keno, who was a friend of his at the time. Obviously he was the founder of judo. And Jigoro Keno had already introduced the idea of coloured belts. And Funakoshi thought this was a very good idea because it gave incentive for people to continue going up. They could see their progress and so forth. So he adopted this idea as part of his Kaizen. Like Kaizen means continual improvement, like a gradient, let's say a gradient of improvement. So Kaizen is the idea of, in karate terms, in more modern times, not the old school. So this is the flip, let's call it, from the old school to, let's say, more modern school. And one of the ideas of introducing the more modern idea was to bring in the colour belt system. So this now transfers and brings us to the second part of Shu Ha Ri, and that would be Ha. Just move that one over there for a moment, and put this one up here. So now we have Ha. And what does Ha mean exactly? Well, the idea of Ha comes from a Japanese word meaning yabure. And yabure means literally to tear something or rip something apart. In other words, to break. Now, we had the first part. This shu is to stick to the basics and commit yourself to basics. The second part, ha, would be to split away from the basics, having gained a very good, stable relationship of how to do the basics, and start perhaps experimenting with how to implement the basics into more techniques. So we could say, therefore, that this one could be looked at as the kumite idea. In other words, putting the basics into practice and making them work in a more flexible way. So the idea of ha is to actually to break away a little bit from the basics and start using your own initiative, your own skills, your own particular ways of doing things to improve your kata movements or your kumite movements or your kihon movements. So bringing all three together. So this is the idea of ha. And the last one here, just put that one up there as well, just leave them there, is li. So what we've got with, oops, wrong pen, ri, this comes from Japanese word hanareru, which primarily means to separate or divide. So with the idea of ri, we've now got shu and we've got ha. So we've got the basics, we've got the kumite concept, and now we go into perhaps the final expression of karate, which can be considered to be kata. So with the kata, the idea is what separates perhaps the student the sensei, and perhaps the master, can be the fact that when the basics are in, kumite has been worked out very well, and the kata has been worked out for all of its different ways that you could be perhaps able to put this into practice. We have a kind of a complete triangle of the three pillars of karate. In other words, what we are saying is that with this one, you may remember in the previous Nijujo, we said Sunen ni shinen kufu seyo. Basically means you've got to experiment, you've got to work out, you've got to think, do things for yourself. This one perhaps is more like kokoro wa hanatan, koto yosu, which is more like you have to be free, the freedom to do and express yourself in any way you wish, to separate yourself out from the art itself and literally almost make the art your own. Now, this is the three concepts, and just leave all those up there for a moment. There's a very nice aspect of this that can be brought out from a principle that's taught in Aikido. And Aikido uses this symbol. Now the first part of this symbol, I'm going to put these up on the board here for you as we go along. The first part of this is actually this particular kanji, which basically means the earth. So let's put that one in red because that's the... So this red symbol in the centre here suggests the earth. This corresponds with shu. So your basics, like, keep you rooted to the floor. You've got that immovable basic background behind you all the time. The kihon is always there. That's like a fire that's burning, so kind of red. Now when you look at the next part of this symbol, we go here and we have yama. Now the idea of yama is the white part here. If you can imagine that we have a volcano, it's smouldering inside, but it is a mountain. So this yama means mountain. And the mountain basically has a snow-tipped cap, which is the white representation. So as you climb up the mountain, you have to do a lot of experimentation, working out, and this relates to the ha section of how you're putting your karate together. The last part of it, a symbol which of course you're all familiar with, is kara or sora, which means sky. So the sky is blue. So once you've reached the tip of the mountain and you're on the snow-capped peak, you can look up and you can express yourself completely. You're free. You look at the sky is empty, everything is there for you to do. You've reached the top of the mountain. Now perhaps you could consider yourself to be almost a master. So this is the different concepts. This is the, I think this is rather a nice concept. It's actually an Aikido principle in this particular icon, but it fits very nicely also with all martial arts, of course, including karate. So now we have the whole thing. Once you put shu, ha, ri together, you get a whole concept. The concept is that you start from the beginnings, from the very, very basics. You continue your climb up through the kumite, including kihon, and then finally your final expression is your kata and a complete circle. So this is the idea from this particular kanji, or it's not really a kanji, it's more of an icon. So that concludes the section on shuhari, and it also concludes now the section on philosophy from the theory point of view. So I hope I've given you some things to think about, and I'm sure you'll continue to work on your own development theoretically, and you can have a look at the videos we've also done for kata and kumite for the practical section. So thank you very much for your attention over these few lectures, and look forward to your including your progress as you go along.